Okay, started.
We're back again with the Queen/Kingdom of Heaven and the childlike, playful states of consciousness and bliss and peace and love and all that stuff that are accessible to us unless we're trying to capture them. And it's just like that healing thing that I described in the last video of my mother being healed of terminal cancer in 3 months of doing this energy ball thing and hypercycling of images. In my case, it was the images that along the paths of my inhale from the ends of the universe to my Big Bang center and back out, providing the potential of hypercycling images, following using Dr. William Bengston's technique along with the meditative stuff that I share. Now, one problem with all of this is that, remember that I had said before, the reason for the hypercycling is that to get the person out of the way so the energy can flow between their hands if they're doing healing related to a person that's with them, or floating into an energy ball if it's distant healing. What can really ruin the whole thing is if I'm trying to heal my mom, or if I'm trying to heal anyone, that gets in the way of the whole healing process. If I'm trying to heal myself of cancer, it gets in the way of the whole process. It's very curious that willpower can destroy the whole thing. So the important aspect is this total randomness state of consciousness, and I'm using the example of inhaling from the ends of the cosmos to my center as my body expands to fill the cosmos, exhaling back out that potential through my atoms and cells and molecules as they come back home to me on the end of the exhale. If I were doing that to try to heal myself, my willpower gets in the way. Instead, if I get lost in that whole process, which I call melting into the cosmos, if I get lost in the whole process, then the willpower thing isn't there. And so what I found is, just as an example, I had a terribly bruised ankle. My whole foot was swollen up and purple, and very, very painful from a basketball accident. And at like 4 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't sleep. I said, well, I'm going to go up to some trees and do my meditative stuff, my melting. And I went up there and started the melting process, the inhaling from the ends to my center and back out, and my mind was saying, this ain't gonna work, this ain't gonna work, this ain't gonna work. And as I got into the melting and the path of my inhales and exhales, including the whole universe, cycling with the cosmos, I got lost in that. And I was no longer even trying to heal or anything like that. I was totally lost in this beautiful feeling of being connected to the whole universe. When I came out of that, 20 minutes later, I noticed that my foot was not purple anymore, it wasn't swollen anymore, and my ankle was fine, and that blew my mind again. I keep getting blown away whenever these things happen because they're so far away from anything that we're used to, and you can't try to make it happen. It won't happen. Likewise, if, say, the same thing with problematic thoughts, if I try to deal with the thoughts in this particular system that I'm using, it's not going to work because I become entangled with the problematic thoughts. But getting lost in the centeredness and the feeling of connectedness to the whole universe opens up the potential of these things, of these wonderful things happening. Why is that the case? I really wondered that. What in the world is going on? I'm not having faith that something's going to heal. That has nothing to do with it. Belief has nothing to do with it. What in the world is happening? And that's what led me years ago into trying to investigate what's going on with the atoms and the molecules in the cells that allows these things to happen. And so I started getting into quantum physics, which is the foundation of what all the atoms and molecules are doing, to try to see if I could understand what in the world was going on. And one of the keys, as I mentioned before, is that 90% of our DNA is a complex language that mirrors all of our thoughts and emotions in our cells. So it could very well be, as we already know, that stress and the stories associated with why we are stressful send poisonous chemicals to our cells. Now, those poisonous chemicals aren't usually poisonous. They're fight or flight coming from our adrenals, which are perfectly natural in response to an immediate situation that requires action. But if the stresses are related to stories that I carry around about what I don't like about myself, about in what ways I'm such a terrible person, I'm ugly, I've got this problem, that problem. If I carry those stories around, my fight or flight chemicals are going to be sent from my adrenals and other parts of my body to my cells on a regular basis, and that can produce terrible diseases. So there's a lot of advantage to being able to melt into the cosmos, so to speak. But what exactly is happening besides the DNA passing that information to our cells? Well, the DNA is a molecule. Now, most molecules are not alive, and I guess you could not say DNA is alive, although it does have biophotons, which is very interesting. A molecule with biophotons. Biophotons happen with life. And so in some kind of sense, that DNA molecule has some kind of relation to life. We know that when we so-called die, the biophotons are gone, and our consciousness is gone. Interesting. So when I encountered the Big Bang Theory, I thought, well, let's see, this all comes from nothing, from a point. I said, well, that's pretty hard to get a brain around. They made up stories to try to understand that. They said, well, all the matter in the universe is packed into that tiny little point, and it's real dense. And I thought, well, a point isn't a thing, so you can't pack all that mass in the whole universe, 10 trillion galaxies. You can't pack that into a point because a point isn't a thing. And they've never been able to find the point of the Big Bang. They've gotten to as close as 10 to the minus 44 seconds, which is pretty damn close. But they say, well, we're still not there at that point. Well, that's interesting, that they feel that they have to find that point when the point isn't a thing. So, to me, that point represents the potential of anything we could possibly think about or observe, or anything that could possibly happen in the universe that we experience is represented in the potential of that point. Now, when the priest Lemaitre first came up with the Big Bang Theory, the Pope said, "That's God." Of course, Lemaitre didn't really like that, and scientists don't like that. And so scientists are trying to get rid of the Big Bang Theory because they don't like the idea that it could all come from nothing and that there was a beginning in the first place, because that can allow God, whatever that is, to come into the picture. So they're inventing all kind of stories like the inflation model that says that there really are endless Big Bangs happening all the time, bubbling up out of the quantum foam. There's no evidence for that. The evidence we have is that there was a Big Bang which created the whole universe that we're familiar with. And that point is the potential of the whole universe. And at the moment of that Big Bang, the quantum vacuum came into existence. The quantum vacuum creates all things, thousands of times a second. The subatomic particles are waving in and out of the quantum vacuum, creating all the atoms in the whole universe of 10 trillion galaxies. Well, that's interesting stuff. Some physicists got so carried away that they called the quantum vacuum the spirit world. Whoopee-doo. I guess it has some of the aspects people associate with the spirit world, but I don't know what the spirit world is. And actually, they don't really know what the quantum vacuum is, although they know that it's 74% of the whole universe is the quantum vacuum, which creates all things. 4% of the universe is the atoms. So 10 trillion galaxies is 4%. So this quantum vacuum is a pretty big thing, and it creates all things. So if I am loaded up with stressors, and my DNA, that 98% language of the DNA, is passing those to my cells, the energy of the quantum vacuum is supporting the subatomic particles that are waving in and out of the vacuum thousands of times a second to make the atoms that form the molecules that are forming the chemicals that are getting sent to my cells, poisoning me, the fight or flight chemicals from the subjective negative emotions that I have repressed. Well, now that's very interesting, because the quantum vacuum is supporting that terrible thing, supporting all things. Now, if my consciousness changes so that the thought streams and stories associated with that I have repressed are allowed to come into play in my meditative experience, and the stories are allowed to be into play, I'm not fighting them, it's quite possible for me then to experience a slow release of those stories. So if those stories start getting further and further apart in the incidence of how often they occur in my consciousness or repressed, my health is going to get better. And when my health gets better, the subatomic particles waving in and out of the vacuum that are creating the atoms that create the molecules that create my cells are matching my thought stream and my cells getting better. So this was a way, investigating, excuse me, investigating quantum physics and biophysics started giving me an explanation for how this tremendous healing can happen, and how the thought streams, when they become healed, get reflected in the cells. Now, my good friend Caleb was asking me, well, suppose then, what's to keep you from trying to make those thought streams healed? Or what's to prevent you from trying to make your cells heal along with the thought stream? Well, because as we've been discussing, if I'm trying to make these things heal, I become entangled with the actual problem and the healing doesn't happen. If I try to heal the thought streams, it doesn't happen because I become entangled with the thought streams. But if I drop into these melting meditative states, and it's always in nature, it doesn't have to be for me because I like nature's feedback, without trying to do anything, dropping into these meditative states because I enjoy feeling connected to the whole universe. I enjoy, it makes me feel good. And I'm automatically led to those experiences because it feels good. Almost as if I would be led to drinking some alcohol because that made me feel good. I'm not saying now I'm going to go drink alcohol because it makes me feel good, but my feeling good automatically attracts me to that alcohol. It doesn't anymore because after the hepatitis C and the cirrhosis of the liver and all that stuff, I don't do those things anymore. But this feeling good associated with melting into the universe or cycling energy with the universe is very, very, very healing. So if I'm in the midst of this melting into the universe, and I'm using the example of inhaling from the ends of the cosmos as I center and back out, a curious thing about that exhale is I've inhaled, my atoms are filling the cosmos. Now, and my molecules and cells, what does that do to my cells, that inhale? Well, the DNA is passing that visualization to my cells, and the closest the cells can get to that is opening up their receptor sites to nutrients. So, on the inhale, I'm expanding to fill the cosmos. My cells are opening to nutrients and taking in nutrients. The exhale is the sweeping the potential back out through the cosmos. As my cells and my atoms are coming home, the closest my cells can get to that is pumping the nutrients through them and flushing them. So these inhales and exhales are playing out in my cells as opening up to nutrients, flushing the nutrients, and pumping it through the cells. The exhale pumps it through the cells and flushes the cells. Very interesting. So as I'm doing that, it becomes like a kind of a joyous, playful game. Now suppose the thought came through my mind while I was doing that. Now my exhale, I'm going to pump that exhale through my cells to heal myself. Well, that would interrupt the whole game. So the randomness of this, allowing the thought stream to be random, with a generalized intent of melting into the cosmos, ends up being extremely healing in many, many ways, unless I'm trying to do it, which to me is very fascinating stuff. And the enjoying feeling beautiful seems to be foundational to all kinds of wonderful things. Now I hope that made some kind of sense. And I think we're going to end this part of the video right here and pick up with some actual Qigong stuff. So take it easy.